I unfolded it, revealing two simple handwritten words. You're next. I turned my head to look at my husband, but I couldn't move. I didn't regain control of my body after the weight had lifted, and I heard a deep male grunt from a man pulling himself off me. I heard his footsteps too. I saw his silhouette leave through the door, and it was only hours later of lying in that same position that I felt I could move again. It started with a pin-pricking sensation through my toes and fingers, then spread through my entire body, like the feeling you get when your leg falls asleep and you have to wake it back up. I immediately went to my husband and shook him awake. He was distraught and confused to be blood on the inside of the wash basin. There were power tools and saws and such down there, as the basement is also Tom's workshop. He could have cut his finger, washed his hands, and not the sink. I shrugged it off and opened the fridge. I was immediately hit with a strange whiff of iron as I swung the door open. There were at least 3 dozen milk cartons coating the shelves inside, with 2 Sprites on the fridge door. I didn't know what compelled me then to reach for the milk. Maybe I was really thirsty for it. Some pregnancy craving. Maybe I knew something was wrong. I had some intuition about it. When I grabbed a carton, it was heavy and the liquid inside didn't slosh the way I expected it to. It sounds strange, like something you wouldn't be able to notice, but I did. I placed it down on the single countertop on the kitchenette, found a glass in the top shelf of the cabinet above, unscrewed the cap of the milk carton, and began to pour. What came out wasn't milk. It was red. It was blood. I vomited in the sink. Tom must have heard me, or knew I was digging where I shouldn't have been. He came down and held back my hair while I emptied my stomach, whispering calm words like easing a brood mare. He called down my husband, who took me back upstairs. He threw my coat over my shoulders and talked quietly with Tom and Sarah by the door. She'll be fine. Just scared is all. No worries. Thank you, yes. I stood there with nothing to say, eyes wide, unsure of what to make of it all. My first ridiculous thought was that Tom and Sarah were vampires. It wasn't until we were walking back across the street to our house that I was able to ask Tom. What was that? Tom looked at me strangely, his brow furrowed. Why are you poking around where you shouldn't be? Are you serious? They had blood in their milk cartons. Tom sighed, pulled away from me. He was obviously frustrated. They own a farm, Liv. Okay. You don't know how slaughtering an animal works, do you? He was so angry. I could see his hands bunched into fists, shaking slightly. What are you talking about? They drain the pigs of blood after slaughter. I chewed on this, shaking my head. Both of us standing at odds with each other in the middle of the road. So are you trying to tell me they filled milk cartons with pig's blood? Yes. Why would they do that? Because it's a thickening agent, high in protein. It's used in a wide variety of dishes. You've probably eaten it before and haven't even known it. I stared at my husband indignantly, feeling shame rising up in me. The last thing I wanted to do was apologize. But here I was, saying sorry in the middle of the street, just to get us back inside the house. My sleep paralysis stopped for a few months after. At my 7th month of pregnancy, it started again. Once a week, usually Sunday nights. I would take my prenatal vitamins before bed and wake up around midnight to find it almost impossible to breathe. At this point, I was no longer sleeping on my back. I was sleeping on my side. Still, the sleep paralysis demon, or man, would straddle my shoulders, his back rising above me like a mountain so I couldn't see anything but the bottom of his feet. Bare, black soles, long toenails that scraped against the sheets. dirty jeans. Sure enough, it should have been a dream. But one night I woke, crying once again, and after I settled I found dirt rubbed off on the white pillowcase by my head, a deep red stain on the bed. That same morning in the shower, I checked myself for any hints of damage. When I was paralyzed like that, I couldn't feel a thing except the relentless weight on top of me, the inability to fully breathe. The only injuries on me were the bruises on the inside of my elbows on both sides, right where I had weekly blood draws at the clinical trial. The clinical trial my husband still didn't know about, though he should have seen the discoloration on my arms when we had sex, which now was more and more frequent. Leading up to my birth, my husband's behavior toward me became even stranger. He worried incessantly over me, taking me to sleep trials which revealed no abnormalities, arguing with doctors that something was wrong, describing my dizziness, my fatigue, the bruising on my arms. The first time I realized he'd noticed. The doctor said this was all normal for someone during pregnancy, especially nearing the end. I remember at the end of my 7th month of pregnancy, I again had a bout of sleep paralysis. This time during it, I swear I could hear my husband crying softly. It was hard to make out over the grunts and heavy breathing above me. I asked him over breakfast what he'd been crying about. He was very, very quiet, and told me only that he had a bad dream that I was being hurt. Maybe, at the time, I thought my paranoia a problem. Either way, I obeyed it. I no longer trusted my husband, nor did I trust my neighbors, even my own parents. I stopped eating any food anyone made for me, and cooked only for myself. I lost weight, became even paler and weaker than before. I stopped attending the clinical trials, and my husband came home with more money, having recently gotten a promotion I didn't believe, as he clocked out of work hours early every day to come check up on me. Except, strangest of all, my sleep paralysis stopped completely. Instead, I slept dreamless, and it was nearly impossible to wake me. I slept for 12, 13 hours at a time without waking up once. One morning in the shower, weeks after I'd stopped attending the clinical trials and getting regular blood draws, I found strange bruising over my inner elbow, a small pinprick over the vein. In the dark, I hadn't been able to see the lack or presence of bruising, but under the bathroom lights, it was there. I confronted my husband about it. He said I probably injured myself somehow. I should go get checked out. I shouldn't be bruising so easily. I told him that it looked like a needle wound, traced the vein's blueness. He looked at me so strangely. Then his phone rang, and he disappeared into the bedroom. My suspicions had grown intense. Something was wrong. No more sleep paralysis, sure, but someone was visiting me in the night still. I knew it. A few weeks before my due date, I didn't take my prenatal vitamins. It was a Monday. It was midnight, and I was pretending to sleep. I didn't feel the usual unrelenting fatigue I did late in the evening, but still, awake, I saw him come in. I closed my eyes quick, heard his heavy breathing over me, and he pulled the bedsheet over my face, whispered in a rough voice, "All right, girl." I recognized that voice. He reached under the blankets, his hand brushing mine above the mattress. I made a small noise of fear, flinched away. He froze. Then he put a hand on my shoulder, moved the bedsheet away from my face, and even though my eyes were closed, I could feel him studying me, watching me. Once I calmed myself, he continued, taking my wrist in his hand and holding the inside with his 2 fingers. He was wearing gloves, nitrile, and he was taking my pulse, I realized, counting to a minute, the longest minute of my life. Then he placed a hand on my belly, and it took everything in me not to scream. Something cold replaced his fingers, and he held it there. My stomach churned and my baby reared up inside me. I was going to throw up. No, I couldn't. "That's it," he whispered to me, to no one. I realized then how I recognized the voice. Tom. It sounded just like Tom. That was all I could take. I jolted out of my sleep and upright, my eyes meeting his in the dark. Sure enough, Tom was staring back at me. I screamed at him and he raised his gloved hand. There was a stethoscope around his neck, like he was cosplaying a doctor. My husband shot up from the other side of the bed. For a moment, him and Tom just stared at each other. Then my husband raised his voice in a way I'd never heard before. "Get out! Get out!" Tom shot out of the room quicker than I could process. My husband chased him out, his shouts and threats echoing through the house. When he came back, I told him we should call the cops. He said no, that wasn't a good idea. He would deal with it. He took a bat from underneath the bed and headed out with it. I tried to stop him, but he left out the front door and didn't return till the next morning. By then I'd found the milk carton laying on its side by my fallen bed sheets, a plastic funnel on the ground next to it. I felt sick, so sick to think about all that blood in Tom's fridge. My blood. I went to the bathroom and emptied my stomach till I couldn't anymore. When my husband came home, he told me he'd taken care of it. There was blood splattered on his face and the bat. He washed it off in the kitchen sink. I was silent, at a loss for words. Afterward, I watched him put locks on all the doors, draw the shades, and set the alarms. "Did you kill him?" I asked. My husband just shook his head no. As he locked our bedroom window, he said, "Just be safe, okay?" For the rest of the day, we cooped ourselves up inside watching movies, taking it easy, as he put it. Laying low, I asked him what Tom would want with cartons of blood. My husband looked wildly uncomfortable, said that men are scary. Could have been anything. Could have been selling it on the dark web. That stuff makes a lot of money, supposedly. He kissed my forehead and pulled me close. I asked him for the second time then if we should call the police. He didn't reply. Over the next week, he told me I needed to stay home, that he'd go out for groceries, meds, etc. Almost my entire pregnancy, he'd been pushing for a home birth, but now he was adamant about it. Meanwhile, I was having second thoughts. What if something went wrong? What if Tom came by? Whenever I shared these concerns with my husband, he got angry. Eventually, after a heated argument, I asked him if he planned to keep me cooped up like a dog till I gave birth or died. He just glared at me. I said I was going to leave for a little while, give him some time to work through things. As soon as I did, he grabbed me by the arm and begged me to stay. He burst into tears, saying that everything he did for me. That he was sorry for how he'd been treating me, how he'd scared me. But he was scared. God, he was scared. He asked me to stay with him. So I did. When he went to take a shower that night, I again checked our bedroom for anything Tom might have left behind. I don't know what I was expecting to find. Nothing on the floor, of course. It had been a week after all. I would have tripped over anything left over. But under the bed was a spool of rope, cable ties, duct tape. My husband and I had never participated in bondage or anything of the sort. That was my final straw. I had a horrible, horrible feeling. I called my mom and asked her if I could come over. She said of course. I tried to go out the front door, but it was locked from the inside. I didn't even know that was possible. I tried the back door, locked again. At this point I was so panicked I started to cry. I checked the kitchen window. locked. Finally, the giant office window was open. 8 months pregnant. I hauled my butt out the window and dropped 5 feet into the garden, and I ran, caught an Uber, and made my way to my mom's place. I've been here 2 days now. I have endless missed calls from my husband. I don't know what to say to him. I'm not sure if I think he's just paranoid or if he's somehow a part of this whole thing with Tom. What should I do? Should I go back home? I don't want to give birth without my husband, but he's scaring me. Tom is a whole other problem I'm too afraid to fully confront. I'm thinking of going back home tomorrow and explaining myself to my husband, getting answers to the questions that have been plaguing me, and leaving if I need to. I don't want to do anything too drastic, like call off the marriage before I know the whole story, but I guess I'm afraid to know what the real story is. What do you think? Should I try and fix things before I give birth? Should I call the police? It all happened when I was on my way to visit my parents for some time away from the big city. My parents were always country folk who always loved to be out in the middle of the wilderness. As I was driving through the highway, it started to rain a little. Nothing I didn't really worry about. Tank was still full of gas. My music was on. It could have been much worse. But it did. Me and my big mouth, right? My car ended up making noises that didn't sound normal. As in, it didn't sound like a car should be if it was working properly. I wasn't an expert on cars, but something told me to pull over. I ended up kicking my car in frustration as I exhausted pretty much all of my options on trying to get it moving again. I ended up realizing that I had to start walking, maybe find someone who could help me with this. I couldn't call my parents because my cell phone had no service. I was in the middle of nowhere. I had to hurry and maybe find someplace I could spend the night. Maybe when the rain cleared up, I could sort out this car problem in the morning. After what seemed like hours of walking, I saw it. The hotel sat on a lonely stretch of highway, a flickering neon sign casting a sickly glow on the empty parking lot. At this point, I was desperate. My car had broken down miles from the nearest town, and the rain had turned into a downpour that had me soaked to the bone. Through the sheets of rain, the hotel loomed like a dark bruise on the side of the road, and I had no choice but to seek refuge. They always say hindsight is 20/20, but desperate people do desperate things. Inside, the place was even worse. The lobby was dim, smelling of mildew and something faintly metallic. The old woman at the front desk handed me a key with a smile that never reached her eyes, murmuring, "Room 13, the only one we have tonight." "Thanks, it'll do." Room 13. The number stuck to my mind. It felt unsettling, but I was exhausted and cold. I had no time to be picky or nervous. I just wanted to sleep. The room itself was no better than the lobby. Bare bulbs hung from the ceiling, and the wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing dark stains underneath. But it was a bed, and at that point, I would have slept anywhere. I tossed most of my wet clothes onto the floor, climbed under the covers, and closed my eyes. The bed lurched, slamming hard enough to lift me up, and that was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I leapt out, scrambling toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. My hands were shaking too hard to turn the lock. I fumbled, feeling the growing pressure behind me, like someone standing close enough to touch, but before I could turn around, I heard the voice again, louder this time, whispering right next to my ear. "I just wanted you to know, it's not your bed you're sleeping in." My breath caught, my heart hammering as I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. I fell against the bed, half expecting to feel something clawing at me from underneath, but there was nothing there, just silence and the dead, stale air of the room. In a panic, I ripped open the closet door, desperate for a place to hide. My mind raced. I had no phone, no working phone, no way to call for help, and the rain still hammered down outside, isolating me further. I crouched in the closet, heart pounding, trying to calm my breathing. But then I noticed the smell, a thick, cloying odor. It was